Welcome dear all to another episode of HomeoMitra Vartaalap. Today's episode is different from all that you have seen so far. This is going to be a pre-book release podcast, and the book that we are going to talk about today is published by the ICR publications, and the name of the book is Principles and Practice of Homeopathy, Advancing Frontiers. With me, I have Dr. Kumar Dhawale Sir and Dr. Bipin Jain Sir to help us navigate about the intricacies of the book before they release it and tell us something about the book in a way that will this book help the student, the practitioner, as well as the teacher. Sir, if I may introduce both of you, they actually do not need any introduction, but Dr. Bipin Jain Sir, as all of you know, he is the principal of Dr. M.L. Dhawale Memorial Homeopathic Institute, and Dr. Kumar Dhawale Sir, he is the grand teacher of all teachers. Uh, sir, before we start the podcast, if we can understand the history before we talk about this book, if you could tell us something about Dr. M.L. Dhawale Sir.
Telling something about Dr. M.L. Dhawale Sir is difficult. He was, after all, our guru. And so, therefore, we have the highest regard for him. But on an objective assessment, if we look at his contributions, I think they are nothing short of phenomenal. Because at a time when he was an allopathically trained homeopath, and he was trained by his father, who was also an allopathically trained homeopath. So he started a particular way of looking at homeopathy from the modern medicine perspective. And so he integrated all that was timeless in homeopathic philosophy with what is current, or what was current at the time of when he got his education in MD in modern medicine. So his contributions start from there, and he has consistently kept that line of going ahead, integrating both the streams and trying to understand how scientific homeopathy can be practiced and moreover can be taught. So his contributions in terms of his clinical output, his writing, his amount of expositions that he gave, and the research guidelines that he laid down, I think form the bedrock of what we as MLD Trust have been developing after his demise.
I will put one
Yes,
very
sure, sir.
important part of it, that he was one of the pioneer and visionary, where he could look forward that what will be needed to make homeopathic evidence based scientific science, so that it becomes acceptable to masses as well as scientific world. So he brought in the practice of evidence based clinical practice with some evidence based and methodology which will promote the intellectual mind at level of logic, at level of emotional refinement, and as well as actions, which will further promote an education and development of an individual as an homeopath. And then he promoted the processes through which the homeopathic research can be done with a scientific acumen.
So from what both of you have said, I sense it right now that this book is going to be for a wide range of audience, not just for the beginner perhaps, but for someone who is also a seasoned practitioner, for him to reflect upon his work and put it into practice in the future practice that he has. So stay tuned for that, because unless you listen to the whole podcast, it's going to be difficult for you to actually understand what this book is and how it is going to help you. Coming to the question of that we have part one of this book, Principles and Practice of Homeopathy, and do tell us if any of you have actually read this as a student, as a practitioner, if you have come across this book. Uh, it took quite some time for part two to come out. So, what took it so long to publish this book?
See, in order to understand that, we need to understand what was part one. So part one was written way back in 1965, 66. It was published in about 66, 67. And that was the culmination of a lecture series which the Homeopathic Postgraduate Association ran since the 1930s. So that was about 30-40 years of work that was put in by a team. And it was putting homeopathy in classical thought, on classical lines. So it was a very sound pedagogical exposition of what homeopathy as a discipline was. And for the first time, we were able to get homeopathy from the perspective of a modern clinician and how he is able to integrate homeopathic principles with his practice. Now, what happened subsequently was that MLD sir started exploring how students learn actually how homeopathy is practiced, how good standardized scientific homeopathy is practiced. And that led him to a very different field of education, medical education. And at the time that he was, and when ICR was established, that was in 1975, we are having the golden jubilee of ICR now. So he went into modern educational principles, which he then incorporated into the type of work that the ICR was engaged in. So from 67 to 87, these 20 years were spent in consolidating that aspect of his work. And so the Advancing Frontiers, it brings his learning of all these years into practice before he passed on in 87. And I think if Bipin sir is able to give an idea of what the Advancing Frontiers was when we took over the aspect of writing it afresh.
No, before that, I mean, I will add to what Sir has said. Interestingly, if you look at the journey from a part one, which is more, textbook style, but it is being properly structured and in a flow of how homeopath works. If you look at the chapters are being arranged in that way. Now, if we look at the transition, what Sir has said, from the primary theory or the concepts to practice, the transition required a competent homeopath. And probably MLD sir has looked into the type of competencies and the efforts a homeopath need to put in to become an competent homeopath. So he went into each of these chapters in a practical application oriented, that what are the issues, what are the concepts which will be, if imbibed, will make a better homeopath of a learner. So the advancing frontier is the outcome of those efforts of practice, getting more and more efficient in practice. What does it require to imbibe and generalize all those concepts? So each of these chapters are connected with the fundamentals, practice of homeopathy, but there are practical applications in day-to-day practice. So what are the processes? What are the evidences? What system one has to follow so that we are able to become a scientific evidence-based homeopath, which are attuned with the competency-based dynamic education, which is now the part of NCH curriculum in undergraduate and extended part, which talks of professional activities which are interested, was envisioned by Sir long back, and the whole of training was based on EPAs long back, when EPA is not born in a scientific world or in an education world. So all those practices he applied and he developed the system. Now the part two is a culmination of conceptualization of all the practice abstract which Sir has derived, and he put it into each chapter. Now the writing itself is so abstract, and the language was difficult for a common person to comprehend and move about the application part of it. So that is why it took long whether to keep an original text as it is, since we all have gone through it, And with our experience of so many years, we could comprehend, but it took long. It required multiple readings to understand each of those concepts. Each word has got its deeper dimensions. It was the highest abstraction. So the conflict was whether to keep this, the whole part of what Sir's original writing is, and whether the common, the freshers to the advanced practitioners who are not attuned to the system or evidence based practice will be able to benefit out of such a rich work. And that is the thing, whether to keep it as it is or to expand on the concepts, make it simplified and demonstrate through case applications. So until and unless the day to day practice evidences or practice examples are put in, it would have been difficult to comprehend the concepts. That's why the whole effort was done, not only to simplify the text, expand the concepts, define them, demonstrate the applications, derive the concept and generalization. So it's a holistic thing which Sir did, and the only effort was to simplify and put in some day-to-day examples.
So, sir, I understand two things from this. One is case-based learning, like how we nowadays in management terms they say that they learn everything through case studies in the industry. So here we learn through case studies of patients. The second thing I understand, I sense this, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the goal here is to create an institution out of a homeopathic doctor, which means he's not just a homeopathic doctor seeing a patient and all of that, but he's now becoming an institution within himself. Am I right in?
Absolutely right. And that was his main concern. Dr. Dhawale's main concern was that homeopathy must go down to the masses. And therefore, we must have a homeopath who is well versed to practice in all settings and all areas. So, in his lifetime, he started a clinic in the slums of Jogeshwari. And we have tried to extend the work in our tribal villages and in our rural areas so that our students can get rich experience of different levels of patients coming from different communities. And so therefore their experience is enriched and widened. And so one of the aspects was that to expose the homeopath to these different areas. The second was to standardize the education and training so that whatever we say the torch has to be passed on. So the torch is passed on across generations. And so therefore we do need to have an institutionalized training, and that can occur only when systems are in place. So Dr. Dhawale's entire enterprise was not only to have a sound case-based education system, but also to ensure that there is a standardization in terms of the manner in which a physician is able to perceive a patient, is able to evaluate a case, is able to come to a conclusion, and is also able to follow up the treatment so that a common remedy response also can occur. And that is what Advancing Frontiers is dealing with through its successive chapters.
So, sir, since both of you are actively involved into education and yourself into research, uh, what I feel is that probably a small part of management studies, if it is incorporated into the academics of homeopathy, would probably help. I mean, I'm sure the whole literature is talking about this, but would probably streamline the way they think.
You will be surprised. One thing which you said was institutionalization. So the book deals with internal institutionalization and systems, and it also directs you in a chapter 6 or 7 how to build an institutions through delegations, through evolutions. So self evolution, delegations, forming a team and propagate the practice. Now this is also a part of this book. So from self to institute to organization, if you read subtle way, that first how to develop a self, then how to make a team, and then how to build an organization, which will then go a long way in helping homeopathy to grow and become a mainstream medicine. So this is that at that level of abstract what you are talking of management, there are subtle messages which is there also in this book. Beside making of an homeopath to making of an homeopathic institutions and organizations.
And then that book has already touched the depths of what we are. I was imagining, but that book is already having.
Yeah,
Great.
definitely.
Would you like to share with us the motivations and challenges of conceptualizing and writing this book?
Uh, I think the primary challenge Bipin sir has already spoken about in terms of adhering to the original literature and trying to expand it and make it a little more relevant to the modern times. I think the student today does not have the patience to explore things on his own. He requires a type of a help. And I think our main challenge was how that help can be provided so that ready references of what concepts we are speaking about and its application is immediately apparent. And when that occurs, then those concepts enter the mind and then they remain fixed. So, one of the things that we had to look at to hunt for suitable case material, which will illustrate the rich concepts that Dr. M.L. Dhawale was talking about. And we were lucky because through the last 20-25 years, we have been having our training program, our symposia, where a lot of cases have been presented, evidence-based, with good results. And so therefore, we had to get those cases, put them in order, and then call upon the physicians who were responsible for the treatment of those cases to come forth and contribute. So each chapter has cases of that dimension which that chapter is talking about, and then indicating how that case experience is aligned to what concepts Dr. Dhawale was talking about in that particular chapter. So that was the major issue that we had to face. And we are happy that our clinicians who are associated with us, they contributed wholeheartedly. And we were able to bring it in a record time.
So let me tell you this that Bipin Jain sir and Kumar Dhawale sir are not just involved with the educational activity, they are also running a trust and they are also critical part of the central government bodies. And within all, I mean, despite of this kind of a restricted time schedule, they have been able to do that. And also the teachers who have, or the people who have contributed the cases for the book, even they are extremely occupied. And in the pre-podcast talk, as we had, you said this book was completed in record time. So this is phenomenal, I must say.
So it was a challenge. The challenge was to first spot a right case at a right place. Then challenge was to expand those cases to suit to the material, the text which sir and the concepts which sir was trying to, you know. So from that perspective, and it was not only just a challenge, but it was also learning experience for all of us. You know how you cannot understand the text until you connect to your own experiences, and this has really helped us the moment we started connecting to our experiences of practice as well as conceptualization. Now those cases have helped us also to reflect while even making the book, and that has given us a different experience and a joy. I tell you, it was a one of the lifetime experience I had while working on this book with sir. I got the, you know, the best of both MLD sir and Kumar sir, and it was a real movement and it really motivated me. I mean, there was hardly any time gap when he used to send me and I used to reply him back. I think I have never done with such a speed any work, but it was because it was energizing. So while doing it has really transformed how you look at the cases and look at the things. So that also was a challenge, you know, getting out of excitement and becoming objective. So we struggle through that part of it, that you have to be objective. You can't get carried away with your emotions and excitements. And the book by itself is such a rich material. I mean, it is a real treasure which has remained inside. And I think it's a right time when we are exploring, when you said the NEP as well as the better adult learning principles. When you talk of relevance, when you talk of self-directed learning, when you talk of the learning which motivate you to explore, which is applicable to your practice. Now, this book has everything a homeopath asks for, provided he get connected to the basics of homeopathic practice, and then the day-to-day conceptual structure which he requires to enhance his practice and excel in practice.
Wonderful. So it was why it was important to understand the challenges and motivation is, although this is not directly related to the book, but if we understand what goes behind writing those books, writing the kind of material that we have, it gives us a perspective to read that book. Now, once we have understood the journey so far, if you could tell us who should be reading this book.
All who are interested and practicing homeopathy, teaching homeopathy, researching in homeopathy, everybody will carry very valuable lessons from reading this book. Because if you recall Principles and Practice Part 1, and if you see the solid grounding that book gives in the principles, then this book carries that through into operations. And a person who can become a good homeopath only when he is able to marry the principles with the practice. So, Principles and Practice of Homeopathy Part 1 and Part 2, I think it is a good marriage of both. And as what Bipin sir has said, that if while writing the book, if we are so much enthused and if we are able to see so many new things in our own experience and whatever we are reading, then I think anybody who is practicing homeopathy or who is researching or teaching homeopathy can get a good grounding of how we approach clinical practice, how we approach literature, and how we bring about an integration of both. So I think, and again what we have said, that since it is competency based and NCH is into competency based dynamic curriculum, this book will be a good, almost textbook for any PG practice, definitely.
And another very important part is we all practice. There are subconscious phenomena, there are some phenomena which automatically happens, which is not at conscious level. Now the processes which is enlisted will definitely guide a mind and the physician to make his actions and the reason behind it more conscious. And once it becomes conscious, you have a chance to correct yourself. If it is not conscious, there are hardly any chances of correcting. So this book takes you to the whole journey of the processes which will be made conscious to a practicing physician, from a basic case receiving a patient on a day 1 till the patient is declared cured or not cured, everything. So it culminates into one of the system of which is called a standardized practice in homeopathic prescribing, the SPHP practice, which enables physician to explore reasons for his actions, and that is something which takes you to the next scientific evidence based practice. And there is another form which finally the 6th chapter explores, is a case concept form, so which also explores and give insight to the physician that or what concept which he is practiced. And I tell you that this is an expansion of what Organon talks about. It's a exposition on whatever concepts Organon talks about, which is comprehended by Sir, applied in a practice, abstracted, and this is the outcome of extension from Organon to all the 3 major philosophers who has practiced Bogart, Bodingerson and Kent, and they are being integrated by Sir and brought out this as a real gem. I mean, as a reader now, I look at it from my perspective. So anybody who is even novice, if he goes through the part 1 and then he starts connecting to the cases which he sees, the part 2 will gradually become comprehensible. The advanced practitioner will find it useful to record, to collect evidence, to find reasons for his actions, find reasons for the approaches, find reasons for the outcome. And then if he is able to accumulate concept, he can duplicate it in his practice in a similar state or a different state, because he has learned to learn from practice, get reflect of his practice. Now these are the key guidelines which trains physicians. So it's not textbook of homeopathy, it is part of the textbook which guides a practitioner how to enhance yourself and improve your internal observer as well as take the help of external observer.
So this has answered two more questions. One is why the name Principles and Practice, not just the name, but in practice. And the second question is how it will be useful for different students, practitioners, PG students. If you still have questions, you can mention them in the comments, and I am sure soon we'll be coming up with the release date of the book. Hopefully, it will also be broadcasted live, so do not miss that. If you can come in person, nothing like that. So yes, you will find answers to that also. And of course, I mean, if you have more questions, you will have to read the book. In the pre-podcast talk, there was a talk of the original manuscript that Dr. M.L. Dhawale Sir had left, from which I understand that this book has been developed. Have you ever thought of publishing that manuscript, or do you think that publishing that manuscript would be useful?
No, I don't think that we are in the idea of having need to publish it. Any scholars who want to consult it, yeah, definitely they are welcome. But publishing will not have much of a value after we have already published the Advancing Frontiers.
Fair enough. So now that we are coming to the concluding part of the podcast, what is next after this book?
Well, as we know that we would need to develop more evidence base, and I think you are aware that we have just published Foundations of Psychology and Homeopathy.
Yes,
So I think we need to carry that forward into abnormal psychology and psychiatry. So one of the major issues that now we are looking at is developing a series, both not only in mental health, but also in physical health. So we would like to come out with a series of publications on standardizing homeopathic approach to different clinical disorders. And if you find, if you know that this is what all the insurance authorities are also wanting, some evidence base and some conceptual grid of how we want to treat different clinical conditions. So that's what we would like to develop now.
this is that insurance part was really it sent me into thinking that you're thinking to that extent, that so that this can also be incorporated in insurance, because currently what I gather is there is a struggle where to put homeopathy in insurance, because there is no one medicine for
Correct.
that particular illness. So yes. Before we go to the last part, which is going to be the most interesting part of the podcast, where I'll be asking them for a take-home message. So we start with you, sir. What would be your take-home message for aspiring students, which means those who want to come into homeopathy, who have done their 12, they are giving their NEET, for students who are into homeopathy in their BHMS and their PG, perhaps even in the PhD, for practitioners who are only into practice, because what I understand now, all these segments are different, they are not one, and the teachers. Reason for asking this question is because you are talking about this book as something, entire thing into one. Homeopathy is a teacher, is a researcher, is a student, and is a practitioner. So what would be your take-home message? How would you like to tell this?
See, the literature that the trust has produced and from MLD and we have produced ranges across the board. So if we are looking at an aspiring homeopath or an undergraduate homeopath, then the Principles and Practice part 1 would be the appropriate place to start. And then there are a series of symposium volumes, for example, where each segment, a teacher of organon, teacher of materia medica, teacher of repertory, they can approach each of those parts in the symposium volume and try to develop their expertise in the teaching. If we want to talk of competency based education, then we have this Advancing Frontiers coming up. If we want to specialize in homeopathy, then we have Dr. Manoj Patel's book on mental health and homeopathy. We have Materia Medica, we have the Staphylococcus which Dr. Bipin Jain has written. If you want to go to a wider audience beyond homeopathy, then we have Life and Living, Sir's book, which gives a very broad perspective of the philosophical principles, wider philosophical principles of practice. And since you are talking about management principles, then Perceiving One as a book has a number of chapters which are based on management principles as well as on research aspects to it, where MLD sir has given a deep thought on how we can reorganize research and education. So, I think from what you are saying, aspirant, teacher, undergraduate, postgraduate, researcher, I think there is a whole list of people who can be benefiting from the type of publications that we are coming up with.
So there is already there the publication already has something for everyone, and more is in the pipeline.
And the most important part is integrated teaching and integrated learning. There is a beautiful paper which Sir has written, and to which now current undergraduate and postgraduate education is going to be established and are going to be further expanded. And each of these papers which Sir has said, or each of these books, have got foundation of integrated teaching and learning. So your repertory is not repertory alone. It talks of philosophy, its application in repertory, concepts. Your materia medica is not materia medica alone. It also talks of the fundamental philosophy, the concepts, and then application. So all these publications, they have got wholesome learning for everyone, starting from fundamental philosophy, from Hahnemannian philosophy to expansion, integration of all other masters, and then how they have in an integrated way applied into materia medica, applied into repertory, applied into clinical medicine. I mean, there are two good research papers in Perceiving, one on leprosy and another on tonsils. It also talks of how research is to be done in clinical medicine. So it's a wholesome thing. And going beyond barefoot doctor, the community health services, MLD sir was such a visionary. He has emphasized what is possibly needed to be done. So the whole community services, the management part of it, the hospital and administration part. So it is a complete package. We are now trying to further expand on his thinking through our experiences and put it down so that it reaches to the larger masses. Now that's the effort for our future. So when he talked of Staphylococcus, it is a expansion of whatever processes and approach he laid down to learn materia medica. So I mean, it's an effort that we go on expanding, because when you look at Advancing Frontier, each chapter has got multiple concepts, and each concepts can be a book. Now that is a challenge, and that is an efforts we will need to do to take all these lessons home and bring in better homeopathy for future.
So what I gather is this is not just one institution's effort; it is the effort of the entire community that is needed to uplift homeopathy to where it actually deserves to be.
That's right.
Sir, now you have already given the list of books which are available, what to read first, what is going to help in with which subject. Now, if someone requires handheld training, what is that you recommend?
So there are multiple ways in which things can be learned. As far as institute is concerned, we have got undergraduate education at Baroda, Sumeru. We have got postgraduate institute in Palghar. We also have got people who are BHMS and not able to do the postgraduate course. It's a training program which is called regular training program. I would not put it as a postgraduate, but it's a regular training program which will make them competent to practice in a normal circumstances. And the second thing is we have got a continuous medical education sessions going on. which will help them
online.
And the people can approach, and they can approach to all our office and centers for their needs. We will try and customize as far as possible for them to further their expertise.
This is interesting. They are not just into formal education, but they are also into continuing medical education, as well as they have a course for what I gather. Let's say if you have done your BHMS, for some reason or the other you cannot do your MD, you have a course which is flexible and also gives you that edge above others once you do your graduation. So with this
And all these training programs are patient centered, practice centered. They are not theory classes. So it is what you learn in a clinic goes to classroom. What questions classroom creates, you go back to clinic, get an insight. So it's a the process through which one evolves. So all our training program are practice centered, clinical centered, which talks of competencies, which does not talk of knowledge alone.
lot more I am hoping that we'll talk about in the upcoming session. So thank you very much,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Kumar Dhawale Sir,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Bipin
Thank you.
Jain Sir.
Thank you.
And please share this with everyone. We are talking this entirely from the point of view of passing on education to the homeopathic community. Thank you.